Welcome everybody to this edition of Attention Talk Video. I'm your host, ADHD and Attention Coach Jeff Copper. And I'm here today to talk to you about ADHD and remembering. Over the years, I've coached lots of individuals that tend to talk a lot. I'll ask them a question and they'll start to go into a story. I've tried to interrupt them a couple times, but they can't seem to stop. As I begin curious, I'm wondering, how does it serve them to continue to tell me these stories? Over the years, what it's really revealed is the fact that many people, when you ask them a question, they can't recall exactly what it is. If they tell the story of what's been taking place, that story, they go down the storyline or the timeline, will help them recall the answer to the question and other things in specific detail. Other times, that story is really more to building a context so that I understand the answer so that when they give it to me, it's in a context. For example, many people often, when you ask them the time, it seems like they build you a clock. Again, sometimes that notion of building the clock and hey, this is a digital clock or analog clock, as a metaphor to say this is what my answer is. When I back up and I wonder, why is it for those with ADHD that they actually talk out loud for a period of time to remember things? And I reflect back on some of my interviews with Dr. Russell Barkley. He talks about working memory being difficult, and as kids we play. A 3-year-old, for example, if they're playing on the carpet, will actually talk out loud to themselves. As they mature and develop between age 3 and 5, that public conversation that they have with themselves becomes privatized. It moves into their head. Those with ADHD struggle with working memory, and often I find that by talking out loud and telling the story, it's actually an executive functioning process that's taking place, that they're playing with the words and juggling them a little bit and telling the story to get the association of what they're remembering. I say this because this would be very powerful. If you notice that you're an individual who talks a lot, particularly and realizes that it's to remember something, that pausing and having that awareness can do some powerful things. Number one, if somebody asks a question and putting pressure on you, you don't clam up and say, I can probably answer your question, but I'm going to have to tell the story. Also, if somebody's asking you a question and you know that you're going to need to tell the story, say, I can't recall that right now, but if you have a second and I can process out loud, I can actually get to the answer. For many of those with ADHD, they listen to this and they go, I don't really want to be the person that does that. Well, it's interesting because your brain wiring is your brain wiring. Some things we can't necessarily change. Certainly you could practice that skill for a little bit and improve to a degree, but really to excel would be difficult. As I described, it's like trying to coach somebody performing in an area at the 20th percentile. Maybe I can get them to the 40th, which is great. I've doubled their performance, but they're still below average. Whereas if I can focus on maybe where they're performing at the 90th percentile and get them to the 99th, that's 10%, but we're going from good to almost Olympic gold. The point really here is if that's how you actually remember things, work with your ADD, not against your ADD. Use those situations, talk out loud as a way to recall and realize that's your natural processes. So, if you have ADHD, you find yourself talking or struggling to remember, I encourage you to work with the situation. As an aside, other people I've talked to actually before they get into conversations, sometimes talking out loud for like a 2 or 3 minute warm up just to kind of get their ideas flowing is really helpful. So with that, we hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Attention Talk video. Subscribe to our channel and go to digcoaching.com/ATV to download a list of our top favorite interviews. Take care.